Good morning and welcome back to the Lateral Lawyers podcast. I'm your host, Shane Rohde, and I'm going to talk to you this morning a little bit about something quite topical in our business at the moment, which is the concept of informed decision-making on behalf of clients, and something which can be challenging for lawyers, clients, and also the other side of transaction, which is what I would describe as the concept of over-lawyering. So let's start with the concept of informed decision-making on behalf of clients. Now, our duty to our clients is, of course, to act in the best interest of our clients at all times. And to do that, we need to ensure that the decisions the clients have sought our advice in respect of are. So I'll start again. So it was very clunky. So the decisions that our clients come to us to assist them with, our job is no more or no less than to assist them to make an informed decision. So for example, if someone comes to us and they're buying a business and they ask us our opinion about the business, that's a very broad statement. So in that case, if someone comes to me and they said, "What do you think about this business?" I then break that down into the various aspects upon which advice can be given. For example, first thing we'll do is we'll say you need a good accountant. You need to get a good accountant, and they will give you, hopefully, commercial advice beyond just a review of the GST returns, balance sheet, and the P&L, and the actual filed financials with the IRD. They'll give you advice and do some modeling around the multiple. They'll give you advice around, various assumptions or forecasts that have been made and presented by the vendor or the business broker, and they will generally give you give the business, so to speak, a health check from a financial perspective and commercial perspective. Our job is to, of course, look at the lease and the contractual relationships in place, make sure arrangements in place rather, and sort of stress test those to make sure that the asset under the sale and purchase that purchaser is buying, make sure that the legal protections are in place to ensure that you are actually getting what you pay for. For example, you have a secure premises, you have on favourable or at least not unfavourable terms with a landlord. You have a series of contracts in place with suppliers and with customers that give you certainty that the goodwill that you're paying for the business. Just getting a bit of feedback here. The goodwill that you're paying for the business is actually protected going forward, i.e., it's not just forward work, or you don't have a sure way of getting access to suppliers to continue on the business. Now, where the concept of over-lawyering comes in is that in that situation, our job is to give you all of those parameters within which you need to assess and to point you in the right direction, like I said, to good professionals like accountants and possibly in the case of property, valuers, builders, weather tightness specialists. So we want to make sure that you have all the information at your fingertips to make a good decision. Where the over-lawyering bit comes in, and we see it heaps, and it's one of my pet favorite sayings, is my lawyer won't let me do something. Well, at the very least, that's disingenuous and often untrue, and to the extent that it's not your lawyer's decision, it's your decision. And the lawyer's efforts need to stop short of actually telling you what to do. It needs to be here are the consequences of this decision, and to communicate the full extent of those consequences. Now, I'll be the first to admit that in certain circumstances, as I've been around the block a few more times and I've seen firsthand the adverse and very serious consequences for clients in not taking our advice, I'll be the first to admit that I have at times got pretty animated in saying, look, when I've asked, whether or not to make a certain decision or buy a certain asset or to go easy on a particular situation for a purchaser or for a vendor, that matter, to say, well, look, I've acted for clients in this position 4 or 5 times, and with this particular situation, and in 3 of those 4, that client has had, gone against our advice and made the decision to do X, Y, Z, and this is the real life consequences for them of doing that. So we're not kidding when we say it could have adverse consequences. At the same time, we will still stop short of saying you can't do it or we won't act. It can also be challenging in the context of property transactions as well, where purchasers want to go ahead and buy a property, and there are resource consents not in place, building consents not in place, CCCs not provided as a final sign-off, or issues with a cross-lease title, and much more seriously, often weather tightness issues. Now, going ahead in those situations, again, it's the client's prerogative. They can choose whether or not they're going to take our advice or not. We will set it all out and we'll give you a real life, rundown if you solicit that from us, of some of the consequences that you may be faced with. So at the end of the day, lawyers shouldn't be saying you can't do this, you can do this, you can't do this. They shouldn't be putting the fear of God into you, because often that's driven by their own neurosis and fear of a client coming after them, which in some cases I've got to admit is warranted. But in the end of the day, we're here to help you make an informed decision, not nanny you into doing exactly what we think you should do. A good lawyer will take into account as much as possible the broader real life circumstances that you're in, and they will assist you to make a good decision. They will also, on top of that, try and adjust their advice. For example, mum and dad investor, not massively sophisticated in terms of being exposed to the kind of cut and thrust of commercial transactions. They may not, the advice for them maybe not to take a risk, because we had a situation recently where a referred client, a new client, wanted us to write to an agent where they felt that they had perhaps been misled and deceived by the agent as to certain matters relating to the property. Property is unconditional, hadn't got their ducks lined up and had a good lawyer give them advice, and hadn't had purchased the property unconditional, only to later find there were some reasonably serious defects with the property. Came to us after the property was unconditional, and our advice was that you should not try and write to the agent and or vendor, and unless you are willing to lose money by paying us up front that you possibly will not get back, but also to have to dig your toes in and wait for the agent and the vendor, if they are hardy commercial souls, which these people were, to dig their toes in and really hit back hard at them. How are you going to react when you're in? It's all very well to say, oh, we'll sue them, but when these sort of people dig their toes in and are really obstinate and just basically know that pressure will get to that mum and dad type of person, the advice for that type of person will, my advice for them will be, look, unless you can weather that and factor that in, I suggest you don't go down this path. Now, someone who's dealing with this stuff day in, day out, developer types, entrepreneurs, I don't even need to have that conversation with them, because I may have acted them for a long time, and I know that they know that as part of the equation. They're used to it. So, like I said, a good lawyer will actually factor in where you're at in your life and what is, and just point out how things could go based on that lawyer's experience of where it's gone for some of these similar sort of categories of clients, if you like. All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for watching, and I hope you got some value out of that. Try and think in that kind of way yourself before you even come to a lawyer such as ourselves. Try and work out in a very holistic sense the full consequences of your actions when you're buying any kind of asset or selling an asset or entering into a shareholders agreement or a lease or anything that you don't fully understand. Get proper advice, because you might spend $500 with us or $800 at the beginning of the transaction, which may feel like a lot if you There's no tangible outcome in sight or certainty that you're going to actually proceed, but that might turn into 10 or 15 or 20, or dare I say it, $50,000 once you sign something by being cheap in the beginning, by not wanting to run it past someone like ourselves. So yeah, like I said, it's expensive. It's expensive to be cheap is one of our favorite sayings, and get proper advice, and have a great day. Cheers. Bye.